You know, you learn so many things, and you start to put most things at the back of your mind. Very important things, very fundamental things, until you come across someone acting in a particular way, and then you remember, I need to talk about this particular thing. It's very important. So this weekend, I'm driving through town and I get to the robot. There's this man lying on the side of the road. And because the robot was red, I had time to actually look over and I realized, this. So I'm like, hey, vuka wena. And hayibo, akadaki umuntu. Literally laying in the middle of the town, drunk. Can't even walk properly. Even Ipara that was on walking sticks was shouting at him to get up and get off the road. And I'm like, what kind of nonsense is this? And it made me remember what addictions. So we're going to talk about addictions today and ukuthi hlangana nabantu abadala leyo nto leyo. Ikakhulukazi mina emithini neyiphiwa. It's embarrassing to walk out here and find a sangoma drunk in the middle of the road. Can't even walk home. It's not even nighttime. Just afternoon. It's embarrassing. As it would be embarrassing to see a doctor in their scrubs crawling in the middle of town, drunk in front of the people. Or a policeman. Because what you need to understand that these things are professions. I take a Sangoma person to be a professional in what they're doing. But because you don't have standards, you sort of forget. And then you want to come. You see, the most despicable thing about this kind of behavior is that you will come here and rationalize it and claim with abadala. Ngumkhulu wayephuza kakhulu so lami ngiyaphuza. Bona abantu bebhizi sinemvula ugwaye emakhala ugwaye abantu abadala. Bona umuntu la ubhizi la uloke ehambe ethe indoda. Ngangena ogogo. Bona umuntu wesifazane sangoma ubhizi unake amantombazane. Manje madoda wangena amadoda. No, angjalo. See, I learned from my elders. I mean, honestly, most of them being kings and everything. So they would sit me down and help me understand a lot about human nature. Because it is the king's interest to understand human nature so he can lead subjects. This is why I operate from a very crystal clear cognitive function. See, now let's break down addiction. See, addictive behavior normally comes because of a coping element where as a child maybe you were abused, so you would cope through that abuse by getting involved in certain things, certain repetitive behavioral patterns that help you center yourself and survive. Because I'll tell you what, most people who commit suicide do not have the ability to create a coping mechanism through their pain or suffering, whatever. And they decide, you know what, let me just end my life. So yes, some addictive behavior tends to be useful in that sense that it allows you to cope through stress, but it doesn't make it natural. It doesn't make it necessary to have addictions. Then we come into development, brain development. See, you have an area here at your forehead. It's called your frontal cortex. Now, most of you have a dysfunctional frontal cortex and you just don't want to talk about it because nobody's telling you. You see this very, very common among black females in actual fact. The frontal cortex is impaired. See, the function of that frontal cortex area is where your seat of reasoning, your balancing of what's right and what's wrong lives. If you're not taught to discipline yourself and methods of discipline and ways of discipline and behavioral patterns that are reaffirming in stability and balance, then your frontal cortex is not going to develop. And it's a shame because most of you are raised by females, so your frontal cortex is impaired mostly. So you see it in black males as well. Now, what happens when this area of the brain is not developed properly is that you start having addictive behavior. You have addicts. And when you look around, most of you are alcoholics. You are addicted to alcohol. Alcohol does nothing for you, but you keep going to alcohol. It actually does more harm than good, but you keep going to alcohol. And then it morphs into other kinds of addictions that you see out here. Some of you are addicted to insangu, some of you are addicted to drugs, iwunga. Sinamapara manje agcwele all over the place. They're addicted to iwunga. Because back at home, this area here is not developed properly. You can't control yourself. Self-control comes here from your frontal cortex, and it's developed as you are being raised from the age of 0 to 12. If you are not raised properly at home, if you are traumatized at home, if you are neglected at home, if you're being raised consisted mostly of stress, you are not going to be developed here. Some of you who are interested in this kind of thing, you can go ahead, look it up. Babylon have done a lot of research on that thing. But as Africans, we know, Uti, when you do something wrong, you always do this. When you realize, oh, I messed up. So physically, you know that something here controls your decision making. But you're out here claiming abadala. Now, I'm saying this because, abadala like me to say these things because, they're always complaining, what are these children doing? It has nothing to do with them. You're smoking, you're bema, it's name for tabane, puzuchwala, it has nothing to do with abadala. Now understand this. When you have these addiction things and you entertain them and you don't try to fix them, obviously you are going to invite spirits afana when I'm addiction. Abantu abadala bakini who died, addicts, will come and sit next to you. Now that is not in a proper situation. Yonke imizi nedawa zakhona. We know this. But when people cross over, addictions should have been sorted. You can't be a spirit and be addicted to something. Clearly, there needs to be something fixed there. You have to fix this person. You can't sit here and say you're okay with umkhulu wakho ethi bhumugwayi, knowing very well that it will kill you. Then clearly umkhulu had an addiction that he needs to fix. And the thing about it is when you get around and trying to heal these people who had crossed over with addictions, you'll notice that actually, once they let go of that spirit that was possessing them, besaphila, once it leaves them in the spiritual sense, they go away from you. But if you keep entertaining the spirit abafikana esasibaphethe before they left of addiction, then izohlala kuwe now and you become like them. Ube isangoma esidawayo, ube yinyanga edidawayo, besitabane sasangoma. Addictions. And it's not even a joking matter. We all know what it needs to be happening in terms of biology and spirituality. You know the rights and the wrongs. What makes it so difficult then to accept the fact that actually this is wrong? It needs to be stopped. And you know, somebody says to me, you know, it's that thing, these children think the gift is something that is enforced and imposed on them. It's not theirs. They don't own it. So they think that their behavior, of course, must be somebody else's doing. Your behavior is not going to be somebody else's doing. It's what you do. Now, if you notice that there's something odd about this behavior that is coming with this particular spirit, then you need to stop and fix it. Because your gifts and your food, you don't want your gifts. It's a problem to you. In fact, most of you are in this path of the elders. Because you feel like this thing was imposed on you. It had nothing to do with you. You don't know what it's doing. And then you get into it and you don't question things and you don't learn the finer things and the fundamentals of it, how these things work. And you think, who is this man? When you don't know nothing about the origins of things. You don't even know where this umgoma came from. You don't even know or anything. You don't. Busy lapha and phuza amagazi embuzi. What possesses the mind to have that thing, ukuthi, you are going to accept things as long as you're going to be able to pass the blame on, because that's what is happening. You are behaving in a way that you know very well is not correct, and you are going to keep doing it because, well, abadala. Then you become this other animal. This is why I always say that it's important to go and find yourself first. Know who you are. Abadala are not going to change who you are. They will complement it. See, I've always been interested in wisdom and knowledge and things. Always been curious. You know, just yesterday I came across one of my old photos and I was scowling as I always am. I didn't have time for smiling. I still don't. There's nothing funny here in the universe. But you see, none of that has changed because it's who I am. The spirit that was created in me stays there, and it always trying to figure out, how do we fix it? How do we get my people to emancipate. Things that are always keeping me awake at night is how do I find a way that's going to emancipate these people. And the land, actually, ever since I was born, I was surrounded by such people. Even now, I'm surrounded by them. And I've always felt like a very old person, and people always gravitated towards me because I embodied this ancient spirit. And I'm surrounded by ancient spirits. That's why I can tell you about things that happened 15,000 years ago. I'm busy here, smoking this name. Ukuthi yabacasula le nto ukuthi nenze imikhuba engasile and then sebenzisa igama labo to validate this nonsense. Whereas you need to go back and fix your frontal cortex. Sizobe siyiqhube le video because nami angiyanyesa. Indlela umuntu omnyama asiphatha ngayo is really disgusting. When we are being serious.